That was so yesterday because Canada had their first television broadcast on October 20th, 1953. It was a complete success when it arrived in Canada. Almost instantly, everyone had their own television set in their living room. In fact, by the end of 1957, there was over 3 million television sets in Canada. Many Canadians living in southern parts of Canada were able to pick up U.S. television signals. Consequently, many people were watching American shows such as I Love Lucy, The Ed Sullivan Show.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, yes, that's right, Elvis Presley. Ladies and gentlemen, could I have your attention, please?
The Howdy Doody Show.
Howdy doody, doody doody, ho ho ho. Well, howdy doody, kids, and hey, Mr. Smith. Hi, little guy, howdy. And Clarabelle, look at all the kids at home and all the kids in the gallery. What time is it, kids?
The Honeymooners.
Too dumb to answer any questions. Well, that's where you're wrong. And for your information, a 12-year-old kid on one of these programs walked in and answered a $16,000 question. 12 years old she was. Stands to reason, me, a grown man, I must be able to answer the same questions that a 12-year-old kid can answer.
Spell anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Thus, the American culture was influencing Canadians. In 1948, the federal government supplied CBC a privileged license which allowed them to create a Canadian television network. In 1952, CBC opened their first Canadian stations in Toronto and Montreal, followed by stations in Vancouver and Ottawa in 1953, and finally stations in Halifax and Winnipeg in 1954. CBC broadcasted appealing Canadian-made shows such as news programs, public affairs shows, quiz shows, dramas, and comedies. With such a wide variety of categories, there was a show that suited everyone. Furthermore, Hockey Night in Canada had been a very popular radio show, therefore it was no wonder that when it made its debut on television in 1952, that it became Canada's favorite program. Every Saturday night, millions of Canadians watched Hockey Night in Canada.
Good evening, everybody. Ted Darling here, and welcome once again to Hockey Night in Canada.
When television sets were first introduced, they were extremely basic compared to our modern television sets today. In the 1950s, there were no satellite dishes. In fact, people had to move an antenna around in order to receive one of the few stations. Additionally, the programs were in black and white, and there were no remote controls. Conjointly, many stations were only on the air for a few hours each day. Thus, one could not watch TV around the clock. Furthermore, this invention was causing Canadian children's lives to change. Kids would rush home after school to watch their favorite programs. Additionally, many traditional family activities were being replaced or altered by this invention. For example, many families were eating supper around the TV instead of their usual dining table. Conjointly, as this was becoming a trend, the TV dinner was invented in order to make eating in front of your television easier. The television was rapidly changing people's lives and usually making them more efficient. Communication flourished. Television made it possible for people to watch live events in their own living rooms. In fact, in 1957, Canada had their first election campaign broadcasted via television. Furthermore, by the mid-50s, there were live performances broadcasted over television, which took this invention to another level. Additionally, usually people received their information in print media, radio, and cinema. However, this new invention was causing these items to become extinct and less popular. Additionally, the source of entertainment was seen as cheaper, thus it replaced other sources of entertainment. News programs were becoming popular, which were causing people to become more aware of their rights by the constant telecasting news and the election coverage. Advertising was taken to a whole new level because for the first time there were both verbal and visual options. Consequently, many politicians used this medium in order to advertise their campaign. The television upgraded in the mid-50s by introducing electronic color televisions and finally the remote control in 1959. It was very crucial in the 1950s that there was television in both English and in French. The basic legislation governing broadcasting was rewritten in 1958, followed by the election. Additionally, Canadian Association of Broadcasters and the Board of Broadcast Governors removed the responsibility of the regulation of broadcasting from CBC. Ultimately, the Board of Broadcast Governors licensed private television stations. Meanwhile, CBC was facing multiple political crises. On the English side, there were many attempts by the government to adjust the programming. Consequently, there were large-scale abandonments of current affair positions in 1959, followed by a French-led strike by producers, which ultimately caused French television to become inaccessible for 2 months. In the 1960s, this pattern continued, and there was great distrust between CBC and the corporation relationship with the government. CBC's largest audience was attracted by the program This Hour Has 7 Days. This upset an internal management authority crisis, ultimately destroying CBC's senior management while transforming Canadian television journalism. Additionally, the French news programs frustrated the government while they were focusing on Quebec's separation politicians and issues. Ultimately, the law was rewritten in 1968, which led to CBC contributing to national unity. Television was a very important part of Canadian history because it improved our communication drastically. For example, one could see and hear an event, thus this led to an improvement in politics. Conjointly, it was altering and making our entertainment more accessible and cheaper. As this invention was becoming more popular each day, advertising came into effect. This influenced Canadians to buy like never before because it was such a new and interesting way of advertising. Thus, it arguably improved the economy because it was making shopping more desirable. Television had many consequences that affected Canadians, which are still in effect today. For example, some of the most enticing shows were American back then. Even today, many Canadians watch American shows, therefore the American culture influences us now and then. Moreover, it flourished Hockey Night in Canada, and hockey is still a major symbol in our culture. Additionally, the television kept upgrading and improving, which was causing it to become more efficient. This arguably sparked the constant need to improve our technology on a regular basis. Many family traditions were altered or extinct due to this new invention. Many children would spend hours in front of the TV watching their favorite programs instead of playing outside. Currently, many kids are addicted to their technology devices, which usually causes them to lack physical activity, thus the increase of health problems. Therefore, the television was an important part of Canadian history because not only did it influence the lives in the 1950s, but it continues to do so today. And now a video that demonstrates how television was ultimately invented.